Hi there, it's Dr. Gianna Reams, and I'm getting a little bit of a jump start on the video for this week as we're headed into April. It's not even April yet, and I'm already wishing for April to be over. Very, very busy around the university. This is the time here when it seems like everybody and their mother has a talk in the evenings. And I've got two of them on Thursday that I have to do, and then some next week. So we do it all in April in Nebraska because weather is unpredictable earlier in the spring semester. So it all winds up being in April, it seems like. So what that means is I'm not really sure what I'm going to get around to the next video. It may be also at an atypical time. So this time, I wanted to talk about the age-old question of was Alexander a nerd? Okay. Um, or maybe geek. I mean, take your pick. I think nerd would fit him a little bit better. Alexander liked to read. Okay. And we're told this. I already did the one video on Alexander and the Iliad where I said no, he did not sleep with the Iliad under his pillow. That was physically impossible. And what that actually might mean, what was the king's pillow. So you can go back and look at that video for more on it. But we know Alexander was a big fan of books. And in the exact same area where last time I read to you about Alexander and the Iliad and the so-called casket copy, a little further down in that exact same passage, which is from Plutarch's biography of Alexander, here, chapter 8, he continues, when he was deep in Asia and had no access to any other books, he told Harpalus, who was his friend back in Babylon, to send him some. And Harpalus sent him Philistus's works, a lot of tragedies by Euripides, Sophocles, and Aeschylus, and the dithyrambic poetry of Telestes and Philoxenus. So there we have some names. Okay. Were these necessarily Alexander's favorite people? Hard to say. Also, it may not be an accurate list. That is, three of the names in there are kind of curious, specifically Philistus, as well as Telestes and Philoxenus. Why are they curious? Because they're all Sicilians. Had Harpalus gotten his hands on a whole bunch of Sicilian works, Sicilian Greeks, hard to know. It may be that in here, Plutarch is floating a suggestion that Alexander, after he's done in Asia, might have an interest in coming and conquering the West. Okay, so that's a possibility. The others, Euripides, Sophocles, and Aeschylus, that's a bit more predictable. We're told in other places that Alexander was fond of Euripides. This is not a surprise. Euripides was, although he was an Athenian, he ended his days in Macedonia and Pella at the court of Archelaus, one of Alexander's not immediate ancestors, but one of the former Argead kings, where he was buddies with the king, and wrote possibly his most famous work there, the Bacchae. Which, by the way, I love this translation by Anne Carlson, or Carson, not Carlson, Anne Carson. So if you're looking for a good translation, it's very modernized, but I actually like her take on it. And then some more translations here of Euripides, at least some of his other works here. Alexander liked them. And the Bacchae was written in Macedonia, as well as a play supposedly called the Archelaus, honoring Euripides' friend. So it's no surprise that he might like Euripides. And he liked theater in general, from what we understand. He had a favorite actor. His favorite actor's name was Daedalus. As for what else would Alexander have read other than our little list there, there's more debate. I think some people tend to be a little bit conservative as to, well, Alexander might have read these things. I'm pretty sure by this point, the Macedonian kings can get their hands on pretty much whatever they could get their hands on or wanted to. So I think we're pretty safe assuming not just Euripides, Sophocles, and Aeschylus here, but also Herodotus. Herodotus would have been read by the Macedonian kings. Herodotus stayed at the Macedonian court under the reign of the first Alexander, Alexandros I, after the Persian Wars. While he was writing about the Persian Wars, he went to Macedonia. Pindar. Okay. Pindar the poet, the lyric poet, wrote some poetry again in celebration of that early Alexander. So almost certainly Alexander would have read those. Xenophon, very good bet that he had read Xenophon. Plato, okay. He was a student of Aristotle. Aristotle would have had him reading at least some of Plato's works, and then Aristotle's own works. Not everything Aristotle wrote would have been published at that point in time, but you betcha Alexander would have been reading at least some of things that Aristotle was sending to him. We know Aristotle wrote 4 books of letters to Alexander. We don't have them, those are among the lost works. Aristotle also wrote a book of letters to Hippolytus. Okay, I'd love to get my hands on that. But yeah, so that Socrates wrote things to Philip directly. So assuming Alexander read those. Thucydides on the Peloponnesian War. Thucydides is not particularly kind to Perdiccas. And a little later in April, we're going to have a special guest. I'm not going to reveal who yet, but I'm sure that we will talk about Thucydides and his portrait of Perdiccas in that chat. The various other Athenian orders, Demosthenes, almost certainly Aeschines, Hyperides, all of these guys. And that's just a slice. There would be things that we don't even know were written that Alexander would likely have read. So he read a lot, and he was known for reading. So yeah, Alexander was a nerd. I love it. And liked his books. So it's very appropriate that we're talking about this here in my library as well. I would love to see that guy turn loose in Waterstones in London. That would be a lot of fun. Or any, say, the Library of Congress. Which brings me to the next part of what I want to talk about here, and that is the Library of Alexandria, and specifically the inspiration for it. While Alexander was touring through Asia and on his way to the great battle he fought with Darius at Gaugamela, it's also sometimes called the Battle of Arbela, he passed by the city of Nineveh. And while there, he wanted to tour the ruins of Nineveh. It wasn't the city, it had been destroyed, of course, when the Assyrian Empire had fallen. And he was actually looking at the waterworks, the plumbing and the dikes and some of this other, because he was interested in engineering. This is something of at how to build cities, and no doubt perhaps thinking about Alexandria, which he had already decided to found. It hadn't even gotten started yet. So he's there looking at stuff. And while there, he saw Ashurbanipal's library, the ruins again, the remains of Ashurbanipal's library, and he was inspired. So I want to do that. Okay. So one of the things that then he added to the list of stuff to build in Alexandria was a library. He did not live to see it completed. However, the Ptolemies did. Okay, and again, not Ptolemy Soter either, not the first one. This took a while to construct. And there is debate. Did Alexander really, or did the Ptolemies say Alexander did? This is a debate I'm actually not that dubious about. I could very easily see Alexander saying, yeah, I want to do that. Okay. I want to gather things. And of course, this was Ashurbanipal's library. What was that? Ashurbanipal was the last effective Assyrian king, and he was a little bit unusual in that he was bilingual. And bilingual for them would have meant he read both Akkadian and Sumerian. And in his conquests, he wanted to go out and collect the knowledge. The Assyrians were doing this. They would go in. They were interesting conquerors because they would come in and they would beat the crap out of you, and then they'd steal all of your culture too. We don't usually think of warlike cultures as being also interested in art and literature and such. Well, the Assyrians were. So Ashurbanipal was taking and copying works from Babylon and bringing them back to Nineveh to protect them. So I find it highly ironic that about half of the library these days is now in the British Museum. Why? To protect it. Yeah, what goes around comes around. But he brought all of this stuff back to Nineveh and constructed his library there. There's been a lot of fanciful artwork about it. I considered trying to show you some, but the plain fact is we don't know what it'll look like. Okay. And the same thing with the Library of Alexandria. You can go out there and look through all of the various AI attempts to recreate it. I will say it probably didn't look Egyptian. Okay. It would have been built on Hellenic style models. Anything you see that does a recreation that's got a lot of Egyptian stuff, that's probably not accurate. So I could show you those pictures. I'm not going to because we honestly don't know. Uh, but we do know that Alexander was inspired. So Ashurbanipal is another conqueror king who was a book boy and was known for his interest in literature. So Alexander would later pick that up and say, "Yeah, I want to do one of those too. Let's build one in my new town, Alexandria." Now, where is this going? Okay. This will eventually lead to the world's first public library. Now, Ashurbanipal's library, Bit Mumi, these are not open to the public. These are open to the royalty, to the priests, etc., special folks coming to the town. Let me show you all of my cool tablets here. Likewise, the Library of Alexandria itself was part of the palace. Okay. So while scholars were invited to come there. They wanted people to come. Not everybody could wander in off the street and say, "Hey, I want to read a book." Okay, you had to have special permission to go into the Library of Alexandria. And like Ashurbanipal, the Library of Alexandria sought to capture all written texts in the ancient world. Now, whether or not that was Alexander's goal, we don't know. But this became the eventual goal of the Library of Alexandria, and then its competitor, the Pergamon Library, as well. They wanted the same thing. Um, and so the library there eventually created an offshoot, and it was in a temple for the Serapeum, a temple to Serapis. And because temples are public, anyone can enter them. Then that was the first public library at the Serapeum. They stored the most popular texts from the Library of Alexandria. So just like a public library today, you could go into the Serapeum. You could check it out, but you could go in and you could read a text, assuming you could read. Okay. So that's kind of where the concept came from, that libraries would collect knowledge and that folks could go into them. So Alexander, borrowing from Ashurbanipal, created, by extension, the public library. So I think he earned, as did Ashurbanipal, earned their titles as nerds, and I love them for it.